Hi there. Thank you.
Hi, take it away, guys.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
Likewise, likewise.
I always say it's so much fun to have my named twin be on a panel with me, so I'm excited for today.
Yep.
Um, so we were able to catch up yesterday. Maybe you could give just a quick intro to everybody about where how you're pretty new to Rockstar, where you've been,
hmm
like your kind of career up to dates, because we're going to cover a lot of your experience today.
Yeah, sure. So, recently joined Pepsi about 2 months ago. Um, it's been quite the journey so far, trying to onboard into a new company during these pandemic and COVID times, right? But prior to that, I was at Activision for almost 3 years, leading CRM strategy there, working mostly on Call of Duty, but also some of the other titles as well, and supporting them. And before that, I was at Nike for a while, where I started in social, leading the global running team, running category, the social team there, and then eventually transferred into the membership team. So working specifically on Nike Plus and that kind of loyalty program and platform. Did everything from editorial frameworks and strategies, content strategy, triggered strategies, all of the above. I did a lot of different things there, wore many, many hats. And then prior to that, I was in New York for almost a decade doing a bunch of different things, but still in like the social editorial space.
Right. Okay, got it. You're in LA now.
Yes.
As am I. So we're coming to you from the West Coast. So that's a lot of varied experience. You've got, apparel, athletic apparel, gaming, and now beverage.
hmm
What made you like, what are the tools you feel like are best relevant to your current role that you did in your previous roles in terms of CRM? Where's the overlay?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, yeah, my background's a little varied, but I feel like it's all in some way, shape, or form sort of built off of each other. And for this role in particular at Pepsi, right, really thinking about it as a holistic digital role. So it's not just social, it's those social platforms, but it's also .com, it's CRM. We work closely with our media teams as well. So it's really trying to connect the dots on the entire digital ecosystem. And so when I think about my career, I've been able to sort of segment every bit of that digital ecosystem in its own way, right? Focus first on social, focus a little bit on kind of broader content strategy, work a little bit in CRM now and thinking about audience segmentation, leveraging data accordingly. And now it's like, how do you put all those things together, right? So how can you tell stories at scale, but also in a way that you're doing it so that it feels like you're being one-to-one, right? And you're actually telling the right story to the right person in the right place at the right time. That would ultimately be the goal. And so I feel like kind of through my varied history or varied career rather, um, I'm getting closer and closer to that aspiration in trying to do that. And so with Pepsi, I'm working, specifically on brands like Rockstar Energy Drink and whatnot. It's really starting to look at, okay, who's the old energy consumer, who's the potential new one, how are we connecting those two segments, audience segments, in particular consumer segments, and kind of retaining the core, retaining our old folks, the ones who've been with us since the beginning, but also trying to recruit, and those could be. Um, that you could do both of those things with different kinds of content, but maybe also some of the same depending on how you chop it up and where you put it, etc. So yeah, I'm just kind of excited to come in and create a lot of great stories and bring our brands to life, but then leverage what we know about them and frankly the Pepsi machine to help us target and get that content in front of the right people to drive the bottom line, drive conversion, get cans in hands, as they say, and as I've learned. So
I like that. So why don't okay, so you said a lot there. I want to go back to something you said like several sentences ago, the right story,
okay.
right time, for the right person.
Mhm.
And I would love to explore that concept a little bit. Something that has always concerned me about personalization is that you start not necessarily, you don't know who you don't know. So you're maybe speaking to a group of people, and there's another group over here that would be a hand raiser, but because you're looking at certain indications of who that consumer is and where they are and what they're doing. What do you think about that? And, really quick anecdote, like years ago, I worked at Yahoo, and their first personalized homepage, right? Ultimately, I thought that all I cared about was Real Housewives and like baby murders, because I had got some articles and that was all I got. But I'm much more than that. Like, I like the stock market. I like fashion, so tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I actually have a really great anecdote for that as well. So when I was at Gilt.com, obviously, if you're familiar with Gilt, it was kind of like democratizing sample sales for the masses. You could get, every day at noon Eastern, new sales will come up and people would flock to the site at like 11:58 trying to get everything, right? But the crux of that was they were sending, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of personalized emails every day to let you know the sales for you. I was on the menswear team and all my emails should have been menswear, but there was a couple of weeks where I was buying stuff for baby showers for friends. And then all of a sudden I started getting a ton of baby things in my emails. And I was like, whoa, this is not for me. I was just buying a gift. Right. And so just kind of to using your Yahoo example, it's the same thing, right? Where personalization can sometimes go a little too hard in the paint. And I think you have to figure out how you can balance the sort of explicit and implicit factors of what goes into those personalizing factors, right? And it'll always be a little wonky, I'm sure, because it'll never be perfect. But in terms of how we can get to that place, one of the things in my previous role at Activision we really tried to do was base it off of specific sort of consumer, like I'll call them tipping points or moments of truth, right? Where we would know after a certain set of actions or inactions, we wanted to throw some content in front of a player to get them to do something. Generally, it was to play more or buy more or something like that. And so, like being able to create and establish a journey to really begin understanding sort of what your consumers are going through, and then hitting specific points, I think can start to tackle that question of like, am I missing anybody? Am I not missing anybody? Are people getting the right things? Because ultimately for me, I think personalization shouldn't be super cold and exacting and ones and zeros. It should be a little bit of that question and answer. It should be a little warm to feel like I'm getting to know you, because then it doesn't creep me out as a consumer, and the brand continues to learn based on how you react. And so once we figured out what those sort of moments of truth were, we were able to create messages across in-game content, emails, and even SMS as well, to keep nudging people forward. And, then you learn, you see what works, what doesn't, and you go from there.
Yeah. I mean, also being at Zynga and working in the games industry, I think that game publishers are really experts at that and tuning it. Like, how far can you push it? When are you surfacing when the person's going to buy something? Are they ever going to buy something and you show them something else to monetize them? And then obviously engagement across the board, whether it's on social channels, emails, etc. So that's an interesting concept. In one thing when we spoke yesterday that I thought you said that was really interesting, and this is sort of in line with something you said in our first bit at the end, there was like content and engaging content on multiple platforms and reaching a younger consumer and your loyal consumer. And I thought what was kind of interesting yesterday is you were speaking about the mashup of game, sports, music, and like there might be like a snowboarder, but they're like a great chef, and so how you're engaging on that platform to reach your consumer. What are examples of that, of bridging cultural experiences, and what kind of social platforms do you find right now are the best to leverage that?
Yeah, for sure. I think we as Energy have a lot of space to play in a lot of different parts of the culture, right? You talked about music, gaming, and sport. I think a good example of how these sort of cultural lines are getting blurred is kind of what some of these young NBA players are doing since they've been in the bubble, right? Where they're streaming Call of Duty, they're doing their own vlogs, they're still playing basketball. And so they're bringing their communities and bridging them in a way that is incredible. I mean, I watch Twitch probably more than I should. But I'm watching guys who are FaZe Clan members play with Celtics basketball players, and you're like, this is crazy, right? Because now, as a kid, I'm seeing two of my heroes come together in completely disparate worlds. And at least for me, growing up, I would never see Ken Griffey Jr. I don't know, playing something with I don't know, a favorite musician or something of mine, right? That just wouldn't work. And so I love how Twitch is starting to be that one of those platforms, I think, where they're starting to bring in different personalities who are being connected by similar tastes, whether it be games or something else. Another interesting platform that I've been kind of it's been top of mind lately. A former Nike colleague of mine is now the CMO, Tessa Aragonis, and I've been kind of trying to figure out Discord for myself as a user, joining a bunch of different communities just to see how it works. And I could see that very easily being a place where, through the way that you develop channels and bring in different fans and give them different roles and things like that, where it could be a place where you could actually cultivate these sort of cross-cultural connections across your community by giving them places that you own to talk about music, gaming, sport, cooking, or whatever it might be, right? And now you are a part of that conversation and can act as that sort of facilitator of relationships as well as community.
Mm-hmm. And then, like, what is when you do something like that, which is all of these ideas, it's like part art, part science. Like, where does the science part come in, where you're taking that feedback loop and making it like a CRM tool?
Sure. For me, it's a little bit harder to do, at least from what I understand, when you start talking about some of these earned platforms like your Discords or your Twitches. So one of the things that I'm excited to build out on the energy side is an actual like CRM program where we can leverage any first party data that we've gotten from sweeps and contests, as well as any Pepsi data that they have that we can obviously leverage. That's the beauty of being a part of a big brand, to start informing, start creating sort of these these custom segments that we can use across media around interests and various other things, to start really honing in on our content, what works, what doesn't for certain segments, as well as to get a better understanding of who's actually playing in these places. Yeah, it's a little hard for me to say, how would Discord work or something like that. But when it comes to having an owned platform where we can house a lot of this content and experiences, whether it be e-commerce or something like that, where we're ingesting first party data to then take that information to spit back out in the form of an email or some other piece of content that is valuable to drive an additional purchase or an additional action with the brand. Yes, that's the ideal. That's what we did, at Guild. Thing that was happening on the site, whether it was in consumer purchase behaviors or even browsing behaviors, things like that, played into the emails and the content you got in the emails, and then that would just kind of cycle through and keep you hopefully within our ecosystem.
Yeah, I think what seems really exciting right now is the acceleration of e-commerce, especially since COVID, and how all of those personas and segments you were talking about building, you really can do a very direct conversion call, like right there nowadays, and more than ever, versus like going to 7-Eleven or going to like the market to buy your product. I think that so much of the research that I've done in the beverage category and CPG category in general is the acceleration of e-commerce and everything from things that I wouldn't even have thought of. Like, I had a chat with Coke, and they were talking about platforms like Postmates and Uber Eats and making sure you have presence there and things like that. So I don't know, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, about how now you're on the digital side and how much you can really impact e-commerce.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'd be lying if that wasn't something that I was excited to kind of dive in and tackle as part of this new role. I think where we need to be mindful is, there's a way of doing things. We have tons of great customer relationships. And we need to understand how we can, balance all that potentially. I think ultimately, though, where e-commerce is important is it allows us to have a platform, or any brand really, to have a platform to be nimble and sort of flex with the changes in how consumers purchase and what they want. And so, if you can have a really seamless supply chain in that regard, where you can shift product packs or even connect yourself to like more instant delivery from your Uber Eats or your Instacarts or what have you, then you're really serving that consumer need very quickly. And I think that's where in this day and age, in this COVID pandemic world, when you start to think about how you can deliver products to people faster who don't necessarily want to go outside or be around a lot of people, I think e-commerce becomes a very enticing opportunity for not just us, but really any CPG brand, to your point, that it is just looking to kind of grow with their consumer.
Yeah, there's a massive acceleration happening right now, obviously, in how people are grocery shopping, and there's a revolution that's happening so much more quickly, whether it's like order and pick up or delivery, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's fascinating to see all of you guys like adapt and modify and change. But in the other sectors that are more mature, what is your experience from those? Like, I would say gaming is kind of has a more mature digital money exchange. How do you feel like there's parallels in how you would try to convert someone to be a shop? Like, is there parallels in game and apparel shopper marketing versus a beverage, which is way cheaper, and a more common purchase?
So it's interesting. I'm the brand marketer in me wants to be like, well, it's all a matter of like every purchase you have is sort of an example of loyalty, right? It's like a badge that you wear, whether you're drinking it like a rock star can, or you're putting it on your body like a Nike shirt, or streaming it like Call of Duty, right? That all that says something about you. So I think for us, it's really like, how do we get people to continue to want to make energy a part of their lives, and how are our products? How can our products kind of infiltrate more parts of people's lives and break out of the expectations that maybe we have set already in terms of action motorsports or other things like that, right? And that goes for all of them, Red Bull, Monster, all those folks, right? It's the same thing. We all have a similar challenge. And so I think in that regard, it's, I don't want to say, turn an energy drink into a lifestyle brand, because I feel like that's incredibly aspirational and lofty, but it's a little bit of that. I think that's what all products kind of ultimately strive for, right? Is to be a part of someone's life in a way that they can't live without it. Now, in terms of what have I learned from sort of the conversion bit and things like that? I mean, I think gaming and things like apparel have obviously gone very much so into like the digital first space. CPG is a little bit further behind, just period. And so when I start thinking about shoppable experiences across Facebook and Instagram, figuring out how to develop the back end for that, and that's, I think, where we really start being able to take a page out of maybe apparel, gaming, et cetera, and start moving a little bit more faster with our consumer.
Yeah, I think that one thing that like media mix modeling and like really traditional brands like Pepsi and how they to purchase their media and how what they put out and the feedback loop that they get was traditionally, I think, slower than like just general digital. And also what I think is an interesting concept, is that are certain types of media like less measurable in certain models? Because that's certainly what I find. I find a lot of the models exist like that legacy existed and then are kind of in the cusp of being updated or being changed, really, really rely on traditional media streams to make the dent. And so like, let's say, for example, if commercials were like the number one way and GRPs, where you get that feedback loop about how that ultimate purchase at the grocery store was happening, right? And then obviously YouTube came along and Google, and they were able to prove it with YouTube. And then Facebook came along and they were able to try to prove it, obviously, with Facebook, and trying to get it. But it seems like there's certain things, especially places that Rockstar would play, maybe more experiential, maybe more like micro environments, that don't necessarily show up in the media mix. Like, how do you find that that's a challenge for you? Like a challenge to gain budget, a challenge to kind of speak to the more traditional sides of like the companies that you've worked for?
Yeah, I would say this year, this year specifically has been very tough in that. I mean, going even at Activision, I would say the fact that we couldn't rely, or they couldn't rely on events to drive video game releases and the things that we would typically do in person and get people feeling it and really kind of getting into the game. Those went away. And suddenly it was more about, okay, how do you leverage digital to do more of these releases and teases and campaigns and stuff. And yeah, I mean, with Rockstar, again, we go back to the idea of cans in hands. The best way to get get cans in people's hands is to give it to them at events, right? Whether it's music festivals or competitions or whatever it may be. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say we're feeling that, and I think we're even feeling it as we're starting to plan 2021. Are these events coming back? Should they be a part of our mix? And I wish I had an answer for you, because we're in the midst of trying to figure that out, and just how much do we want to put our eggs in that basket, or figure out a balance, or just say, hey, we're just going to go all digital or all somewhere else to kind of figure out if we can, for the first 6 months, and then figure out what the last 6 months of the year are. These are all kind of ongoing conversations, but yeah, I mean, 100% we're feeling that sort of, I wouldn't say it's confusion, but certainly ambiguity. And it's not the most fun place to play.
You're not alone, all right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of us are, but how do you approach that? I had actually with brand innovators last week, women in brand marketing conversation with Alison Witherspoon, who's the CMO of Nissan. And she was saying that what they've done is they've literally planned multiple scenarios, like an optimistic scenario, like she was talking about college sports, and like the optimistic scenario would there actually be fans, right? And then like the middle scenario is that they actually play, but there might not be fans, and then the worst case is that nothing happens and you have to like totally allocate altogether. And so building 3 media plans, 3 programs, 3 things. And it was like, I was like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work for you. Your agency partners, like, how are you guys navigating that? And it doesn't really matter. Like the one category, like gaming, you were at Activision, it's kind of less impacted in certain ways. Definitely there's not E3 necessarily, right? But how are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the conversations that I'm having with our leads is leaning on digital, creating content, trying to own these experiences more than we would have in the past, and drive people into these places. Whether we're doing more YouTube streams, we're creating our own. Let's just say not like concerts and stuff, but music content or whatever it may be, gaming content, etc. How can we take our communities behind the scenes, and really put them where maybe they wouldn't be? Because I think there's going to be a lot of forced FOMO at the beginning of next year, right? Where you may not feel comfortable in joining a lot of this stuff. So we as a brand can be that sort of that proxy for you. And so we're starting to figure out not so much media plans and stuff, but certainly trying to figure out from a content perspective how we can create that proxy vibe for our communities, and then connect with the media teams to figure out, okay, well, organic's not going to work, so this has to be a part of a bigger thing. Is it distribution partnerships? Is it setting some money aside to boost posts, or whatever it may be? So we're in the thick of all that planning right now. So yeah,
it's a lot. Yeah, I think, and what I kind of didn't really take into consideration exactly as I was learning more about the beverage category during COVID is like how much transacts at events, like at music festivals, maybe it's at, I don't know, theme parks, like wherever people go to get energy, right? Like they're not necessarily there right now. So how does that relate to the messaging? Like if some of the messaging is related to like something that you could have done, but you can't do now, are you like changing, pivoting with the platforms that you pivot? Are you pivoting also the story that you're telling?
Likely only because now it's not about how we're sponsoring an event. It's more about how we're working with maybe this artist or this athlete. And it's about going deeper with them to create that connection with us and the brand, versus like just, putting signage everywhere at on the ground event and just kind of being there. Right. And getting a lot of that earned media from people taking selfies or whatever. Right. Now in my opinion, I think we now need to take a more active role in this conversation around culture and everything that we would have done otherwise on the ground. And now we need to own that and drive that conversation forward and leverage, maybe the dollars that we would have put to having space on the ground to now connecting with the right voices and whatnot in that space to help amplify our authenticity in other more creative ways versus just at an event.
So when you like how custom is your approach to the different platforms? So like Discord, versus a Twitch, like, and how do you build your your relationship with the consumer differently on those different platforms?
Sure. So yeah, I'm in the process of sort of finalizing all those channel roles and whatnot. And so I've gone through and, I like to use a Nikeism, this idea of master the fundamentals, right? And so kind of really trying to dig in and create a foundation for us, specifically on Rockstar, to really nail our strategy going forward. And so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and we're looking at TikTok and stuff as well, as one would, but putting roles to each one of those channels. So for Instagram, for us might be more of the behind the scenes. So how do we start creating content and opportunities where it feels like we're pulling the curtain back a little bit for our community? So that could be digging into a day in the life of our athletes, or what they do to train, or how they're surviving COVID themselves, things like that, right? Give people access they wouldn't normally have. On Twitter, we want to get to a point where it feels like you're having an active conversation with us, right? My example is, if you were in a group chat with us, what would it look like, right? It's memes, it's content, it's points of views, it's a little bit of, hey, did you just see this? If we have a really awesome win or podium shot or something like that for some of our athletes. And so that's kind of how we approach it. And this has been an awesome work in progress for me over the last couple of months to really take a step back and develop that foundation so that we can really hit the ground running now. So we are now just in the midst of sort of beginning to figure out how to kind of accelerate our content creation to hit those different types of channel roles, so that no matter where you enter, it looks, feels, acts like Rockstar, but it feels authentic to that channel, and it doesn't feel like you're just getting the same thing across every single platform as well.
So there is significant personalization by platform. Like I know it's even more difficult to shoot content right now. So I think that you probably want to get as much out of what you can as possible, but you are like, how custom and how personal by platform and how bespoke? Like, is it not going to do as well if it's on Reels, and on TikTok, or that same bit of content? Like, how do you personalization on those platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I always think you should make every channel distinct in some way, shape, or form, because then you're doing a disservice to your brand. And you're doing a disservice to the consumers that follow you on different platforms and channels, right? And so people don't come. Well, maybe now they do because of Reels, but before Reels, people don't come to Instagram to be necessarily entertained in the same way you would be entertained on TikTok, right? It's a different language that you're speaking with, and so. The way I look at it is, we will always be Rockstar, and every brand is always its brand. But just like when I talk to you, or I talk to my mom, or I talk to my boss, or a best friend, my inflection and my tone, and it slightly changes to be authentic to the person that I'm speaking with. But I'm always me. I never change, right? And that's how I look at it when it comes to our platforms. It's always going to be us. The way in which we're speaking needs to shift a little bit so that it doesn't feel jarring when consumers see it, both within a feed and also when they go from place to place for us. I mean, right now, because resources, to your point, all that stuff, sometimes you do have to put things on multiple channels, and especially when it's about programs. But when we start really digging into our actual like organic content that we're creating, I'd love to. My goal is to, cut and edit things in a way that, Twitter, it's a little bit of a teaser, driving you to the full edit on YouTube. On Instagram, it's the B-roll, and you have an IGTV of like a cut of the full video that still drives you to YouTube because that's our like library, right, and things like that. So really creating like ultimately what it comes down to tactically is like an epic deliverables list that ladders up to that sort of channel strategy, so that you're giving a different taste everywhere you go.
Do you know the duplication on platform for consumers when you're doing multiple platforms? Do you know if this person has seen and been exposed to the content? Can you close the loop like between Instagram and YouTube, for example?
It's a great question.
Good incremental reach. I know that's like the holy grail, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure from like a media perspective, when you're thinking about amplifying, you can do suppressions and such to ensure that you're not double counting folks in terms of what you're showing people to, in terms of your ads. From organic, it's obviously a little bit harder to do that. But I think that's also why, no matter what, it's important to give everybody different tastes. So even if they are going from place to place, it always feels fresh and like, oh, this is something new. And then they can come to expect that there's value in following you across all these channels, versus just, being, I get what I need from Instagram or whatever it may be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of like, your friends when they're posting the same exact thing on Insta and Facebook, you're like, I'm going to like this twice because I care about you, but it's kind of annoying because I've already seen it.
Exactly.
We have some questions, so I'm going to, let's see here. Do you find that one place of unity between existing customers and new is on purpose? Does Pepsi's energy portfolio focus on purpose? Okay. It's kind of two questions.
Okay, so the first one is, does Pepsi Energy Portfolio focus on purpose?
Yes.
And then, okay.
And the second one is between existing and new customers, and where's the space of unity between the two?
Sure. So I'll tackle the customer question first. So, I mean, much like most brands, I have to imagine, right, are sort of, we're looking to get after the younger generation, right? We want Gen Z. We want to invite more folks into to enjoy our products. But in terms of the ones who have been with us forever, they're the millennials, right? They're even slightly older millennials. Rockstar's been around for quite some time at this point, and so we I think there is crossover in how you talk to both of those folks, but the beauty of social, I think, is that you can create a sharp point for how to talk to that aspirational consumer, which in my opinion is the Gen Z, right? Culture is created by the youth. They're the ones with the fingers on the pulse of everything. And so we need to make sure that as we create our content and our approach, that we're staying true to our core and not forgetting sort of what's endemic to us, whether it be action, motorsports, skate and surf, all the things that have made us who we are and brought us to where we're at currently, and continue to inject that, but with fresh blood and new life and a fresh lens that'll impact Gen Z, whether it's bringing a more purposeful approach to the ways we talk and include our athletes in terms of what makes them tick other than just their sport. What do they like? How can we get them more involved, give them a platform? Or something totally new where now we have a point of view on memes and we can just be a part of those fun conversations. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and then in terms of purpose, like that could get a little of a weighty conversation. But I will say, personally, I think it's important for brands to understand the value that they're bringing to to consumers and understanding the needs that they're trying to fulfill. And the need isn't necessarily I need to buy something. The need is I need to feel something. I need something, I'm missing something, right? So when I'm thinking about my content strategy, I'm thinking about that purpose. And it's how is my product and brand trying to fulfill a need, and then how are we creating to ensure that they're getting that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we consume, they have bigger meaning than just what they are to us. Like, I drink almond milk. I don't know. I care about my health. I'm into new alternative foods and healing modalities. Like, you know what I mean? It tells a certain story. So you have that too, that you're constantly building with the brand of Rockstar. Can we have another question here? Automation and personalization seem to conflict. So how do you really combine them well?
That's a good question. So, I think I would, like right off the bat, I kind of want to be like, automation can be personalization, but personalization isn't necessarily automation. And so, I think there's parts of being the way to make automation feel personalized and warm, I think, is to kind of go back to what we talked about earlier around understanding the consumer journey and then finding those moments of truth. So let's just say, you've got an app, and after 10 visits to the app, things drop off. Well, then you should create a moment that is automated at their 8th visit, being like, hey, don't forget to do this thing. Or at their 10th visit, hey, here's an incentive to come back for an 11th time, or what have you, right? And that's where automation, I think, helps with driving engagement. And then you use additional personalization to create more of a warmer relationship by the content that you're surfacing up in, feeds or even in emails, based off of some of the more, maybe implicit things that you're finding out, whether it's search behaviors or general kind of segment characteristics that you can kind of pull out and be like, I know that these have a propensity to buy or engage or do something else. But for me, the automation comes at finding those tipping points, tackle those tipping points to drive the desired behavior or change the behavior, and then use personalization to keep them in there.
I mean, and that must be also something that to kind of piggyback off on what you were saying about your consumer you're doing now, because your loyal consumer, the older millennial, I'm Gen X, but I remember Rockstar. I remember Rockstar being like super hip at clubs, like the thing. How about lapsed? Do you guys also think about like lapsed older millennials? It's not only growing your Gen Z, it's because in gaming we talk about that all the time, right? That lapsed user, the person that played the last Call of Duty, but they're not playing this new one on you, and you want to get them. Like, and how does that kind of how are you utilizing maybe automation for that too, to re-engage this lapsed consumer? That must be more difficult in beverage than it is in games, right?
For sure. And, interestingly, I feel like most of the conversations I've had is about like kind of maintaining who we have and attracting new folks. It's less about like, how do we plug the leaky, how do we plug the funnel, the leaky bucket or whatever. And so I think, again, to go back to like e-commerce, first party owned platforms, that's why those things are important, right? Because then we do know who's kind of fallen out of the bucket, who's left the funnel, and then we can try to pull them back with coupons or things like that. And I'm sure through there are certain segments that we know have bought in X X days. I've not dived right into those quite just yet. I'm very focused on sort of social strategy, but that's for me again why first party data is so important.
Yeah, but maybe there's a reason. I mean, we were talking when we were prepping about this and how it needed to be like you're so new to Rockstar. There's so many things that you're building and creating and learning right now. So maybe there's a reason why lapsed users are not a thing. I know in games, lapsed users always seem to be one of the, and most marketing plans I've seen are often, one of the things mentioned. But maybe there's a reason our lapsed consumers are not coming back. But I can't imagine that would be the case, because I know just from personal experience, sometimes you move away from something and then you come back to it later. It's just
right. And that's why for me, I'm like, I think this is actually fascinating, because if I can go to folks who were drinking Rockstar 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and understand why they left. Maybe they couldn't find it anymore, or there was some other reason. Then I can provide them like sort of the opposite of that, right? We're like, actually, here, no, it's right here. Here's the closest store you can find it, or whatever it may be, and really leverage that data to get them to get cans in hands.
Yeah, and it's also the perception thing. Like my perception of Rockstar will always be what I remember of it, which is like clubbing in Hollywood, and you know what I mean? Like them like hiring like the girls to be like passing it out and whatever. It was kind of at the beginning and the dawn of the brand, but that's also an advantage you have, right? Because my brand, like maybe Gen Z, you're like proving your coolness as compared to some, more younger disruptor brands. But for me, you're more, you already have that. Do you know what I mean? I already have that image imprinted that you probably, you've grown from, but yeah.
Yep. 100%. And so the goal is to leverage that sort of cachet that we already have and use that as a foundation to now try to attract a new generation of folks who are going to be super pumped to see us all over the place and ask for us at clubs and whatever it may be. So
awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Gabriel and Gabrielle, for closing out such an amazing day on this joint webinar hosted by Turtle on personalization and this Brands Innovators livecast on digital innovation. So a special thank you to our speakers for such engaging and insightful conversations today. I know I personally took so much from each of their sessions. We hope you all will join us again for our next Brand Innovators livecast tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. For part 4 of Influencer Marketing, a livecast hosted by Influential. We'll be joined by marketing leaders from Therabody, Elf Beauty, Gallo Wines, Taco John's, and more. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we hope to see you again.